The mid-1800s in America saw a significant increase in Chinese immigration. This immigration was largely fueled by the gold rush and the need for inexpensive labor. Chinese immigrants took on essential roles in industries like railroad construction. They often accepted hazardous jobs with minimal compensation. The transcontinental railroad's construction relied heavily on Chinese laborers. These laborers faced extremely harsh working conditions and significant dangers. Their tasks included blasting tunnels and laying tracks across difficult terrain. The work resulted in high mortality rates among the Chinese laborers. As the railroad construction progressed, economic anxieties began to rise among white workers. White workers accused Chinese immigrants of stealing jobs, leading to increased resentment. This resentment was fueled by the perception of unfair competition in the labor market. The anti-Chinese sentiment spread across the country, exacerbating social tensions. Political rhetoric can be used to amplify public fears. Politicians and media outlets sometimes exploit anxieties for political gain. This can involve portraying specific groups as threats to national identity. Stereotypes are often propagated to reinforce negative perceptions. These stereotypes may depict targeted groups as immoral, dirty, or dangerous. The Chinese Exclusion Act was passed by the U.S. Congress in 1882. This law marked an unprecedented act of discrimination in U.S. history. It specifically banned an entire ethnic group from immigrating to the United States. The targeted group was the Chinese population. The act imposed a ban on the entry of Chinese laborers into the United States. It also prohibited Chinese immigrants from obtaining U.S. citizenship. These measures formalized racial exclusion in immigration policies. The act effectively institutionalized discrimination against Chinese individuals. Laws imposed specific travel restrictions on Chinese immigrants. These laws mandated that Chinese immigrants carry special certificates for travel. Failure to possess these certificates could result in legal repercussions. The legal framework also permitted deportation of Chinese immigrants. Deportation could occur without adherence to standard due process rights. These measures significantly curtailed the freedom and rights of Chinese immigrants. Chinese Americans already residing in the U.S. encountered significant difficulties. A major challenge was the separation of families, which often lasted for decades. This separation was largely due to the risk associated with leaving the country. There was a considerable fear that individuals might not be permitted to return to the U.S. This fear stemmed from discriminatory immigration policies and practices. These policies created immense emotional and social strain on Chinese American families. Chinese neighborhoods became targets of violent attacks. Homes were burned and residents were killed during these attacks. Law enforcement often did not intervene to protect the community. This lack of protection highlighted the vulnerability of Chinese neighborhoods. The federal government repeatedly renewed the Chinese Exclusion Act. These renewals served to expand the scope of the discriminatory policies. The act solidified the message that certain races were unwelcome in America. This entrenchment of discrimination had long-lasting societal impacts. Chinese Americans experienced prolonged and systemic discrimination. This discrimination included limitations on fundamental rights such as voting. Restrictions were also placed on their ability to own property. These discriminatory practices contributed to their marginalization as outsiders. The act was repealed in 1943 during World War II. The repeal occurred when China became a U.S. ally. This alliance was primarily driven by strategic interests. The repeal was not necessarily due to a recognition of the act's inherent injustice. The U.S. prioritized wartime alliances. The repeal was a matter of political expediency. The Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed, but no formal apologies were issued. No reparations were provided to the victims of the act. The absence of apology and reparations leaves the historical wrong unacknowledged. This lack of acknowledgement perpetuates the harm caused by the act. The victims and their descendants did not receive any form of restorative justice. The Chinese Exclusion Act established a precedent for legalized racism in the U.S. It demonstrated how fear and prejudice could be codified into law. This act served as a blueprint for future discriminatory policies. These policies included immigration quotas based on national origin. It also influenced the implementation and enforcement of segregation laws. The Act's legacy highlights the dangers of institutionalizing discrimination.